My son packed our bedroom for the basement. Then I revealed who would inherit everything. I came home one day early and found my wife sitting beside two cardboard boxes marked basement. From the kitchen, I heard my only son say, "The basement is good enough for them. Once they're downstairs, they'll stop fighting us." His wife was measuring our bedroom for her king-size bed. Her father was drinking the bourbon I had saved for our 45th anniversary. Her mother had already booked a real estate agent to show our house on Monday. They had booked movers before asking us to move. My son had told his wealthy in-laws that he paid our bills every month. He had never paid a single one. He believed our home was the last valuable thing two tired old people owned. What he did not know was that the quiet repairman he was trying to erase had built a life none of them understood. And before that weekend ended, the room they chose for us would become the symbol of everything they had lost. My name is Walter Hayes. I was 68 years old when my son decided I had become inconvenient. That Friday, I was returning to Knoxville from a fishing trip in Missouri. Rain had washed out our final day, so I changed my flight and decided not to tell my wife, Ruth. After 44 years of marriage surprises become small treasures, I pictured her opening the door, pretending to scold me for not calling, then asking whether I had eaten anything besides gas station peanuts. The driveway looked wrong before I even parked. Evan's black SUV was there. So was his wife Sloane's pearl white crossover. Beside them sat the silver Mercedes belonging to her parents, Grant and Marcy Caldwell. At first I thought Ruth had invited everyone for dinner. Then I saw the empty roll-off dumpster beside my garage. I sat behind the wheel for 3 seconds, listening to the rain tick against the windshield. A dumpster does not arrive at a family visit by accident. I carried my duffel bag to the front door and let myself in. "Ruth," I called. "You home, sweetheart?" No answer came. Then I heard a soft, broken sound from the living room. Ruth sat on the edge of our couch, clutching our wedding photograph. In it, I wore a suit that did not fit, and she had daisies in her hair because roses had been too expensive. 2 taped boxes rested at her feet. One said Ruth Winter Clothes. The other said Basement Bathroom. Her face was wet with tears. I dropped my bag. "What happened?" She looked up so fast the photograph nearly slipped from her hands. "Walter." Her voice cracked. "You weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow. I came early. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her hands would not stop trembling. "They came after lunch," she whispered. "Evan said it was time to talk about the future." Before I could ask what that meant, laughter rose from the kitchen. Sloane's laughter was light and sharp, the kind that always sounded practiced. Then Grant Caldwell said, "Once that wall is opened, you'll finally have a proper entertaining space." My house went quiet inside me. I walked toward the kitchen. Ruth reached for my sleeve. "Walter, please don't lose your temper." I looked at her boxes. I'm not sure I have one left to lose. I stopped in the kitchen doorway. Evan stood near the breakfast nook, holding one end of a tape measure. At 39, he had my height, and Ruth's gray-blue eyes, but little else about him felt familiar in that moment. He wore a quarter-zip pullover with the logo of the luxury fitness company where he worked as a regional sales manager. His hair was cut too carefully. His watch was too large. His smile disappeared when he saw me. Sloane held the other end of the tape measure across our kitchen island. She had clipped paint samples to a white board. The words "Bone Cloud" and "Winter Linen" were written across colors that all looked exactly the same to me. Her mother, Marcy, sat on one of our stools with a black marker and a roll of gray packing tape. She had just written "basement linens" across another box. Her phone lay beside her with a message from a local real estate agent. Monday, 10 a.m. walkthrough, confirmed. Her father, Grant, leaned against the refrigerator with my anniversary bourbon in his hand. Nobody had asked permission to open it. Nobody looked ashamed. Evan dropped the tape measure. It struck the floor with a metallic slap. Dad. I looked from him to the boxes of cabinet handles on the counter. What are you doing? Sloane recovered first. She always did. Oh, Walter. You're back. She gave me a smile that belonged on a customer service poster. This is awkward. We were hoping to have the first phase organized before you returned. The first phase of what? Grant took a slow sip of my bourbon. The transition, he said. I turned to Evan. Use a sentence I can understand. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. Dad, Mom and I talked this morning. From behind me, Ruth said, You talked. I cried. His face tightened. Mom, that's not fair. What isn't fair? I asked. Sloane set down the paintboard with an impatient little sigh. Fine. We'll be direct. Evan and I are moving in. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. You're moving into our house. It makes sense, she said. Our lease downtown ends next month. This place has far more space than two retired people need, and Evan is here constantly helping you anyway. I looked at my son. He glanced toward Grant and Marcy before looking back at me. We're trying to make things easier. For whom? He did not answer. Sloane pointed toward the hallway, as if she were giving a contractor a tour. We would take the primary bedroom because of the attached bathroom. The upstairs guest rooms will become my office and a nursery eventually. Your old den can be converted into a media room. You and Ruth would move downstairs. She said it while standing in Ruth's kitchen, as casually as if she were assigning seats at a restaurant. You two go to bed by 9, Sloane added. You don't entertain. Half this house is wasted on memories and furniture nobody uses. Evan and I are the ones still building a future. Marcy nodded. And downstairs you won't be underfoot while the contractors are working. Ruth made a small sound behind me. I stared at Sloane. Downstairs where? The finished room beside the laundry area, she said. It has a window. It has one narrow window near the ceiling. Then we'll make it cozy. Marcy finally looked up from her phone. Walter, people your age often do better in smaller spaces. Less to manage. Less clutter. Sloane found some wonderful pictures of senior suites. Senior suites, Ruth repeated. You mean basements? Grant waved one hand. Words matter less than attitude. I looked at the bourbon in his other hand. So does permission. He followed my gaze, then smiled as if I had made a joke. Evan stepped between us. Dad, don't turn this into a fight. I walked into my kitchen and found 4 people planning which room I will be allowed to sleep in. I think the fight arrived before I did. He lowered his voice. You're making this harder than it has to be. What exactly has to be? His jaw flexed. You and Mom can't keep living like this forever. Like what? In this old house. With repairs, with bills, with everything. The kitchen seemed to tilt. I had paid every bill in that house before the due date for 37 years. I had replaced the roof 2 summers earlier with a crew I had known since my company days. The furnace was 3 years old. The property taxes were paid. Ruth and I had no mortgage. Which bills are worrying you? I asked. Evan's eyes flickered. Sloane answered for him. All of them. Evan has been carrying far too much responsibility. Has he? Marcy folded her arms. He never complains, but we know what supporting aging parents can cost. Groceries, utilities, home maintenance, medical expenses. He has a family of his own now. Ruth stepped into the kitchen. He has never bought us groceries. Evan's face turned red. Mom, please. You told them you support us, she asked. Not exactly. Grant gave him a hard look. You said you send money every month. Silence fell. I heard the refrigerator motor turn on. I heard rain beginning against the back windows. Most clearly, I heard the sound of my son's character cracking open. Do you send money every month? I asked. Evan looked at the floor. Not money exactly. What do you send? He swallowed. I help in other ways. Ruth laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You forgot my birthday last year. Mom, this is not about birthdays. No, I said. It's about a story you told these people. A story where you are the generous son keeping 2 helpless old parents alive. Sloane rolled her eyes. Walter, nobody is calling you helpless. You packed my wife's clothes. We were trying to prevent stress. You made her cry. She is emotional. The words left Sloane's mouth casually. That made them worse. I had watched Ruth bury both her parents. I had watched her sit beside our son through pneumonia, a broken arm, a divorce scare, and every foolish crisis of his adult life. I had seen her frightened, exhausted, furious, and grieving. I had almost never seen her reduced. Sloane had reduced her in her own living room and called it emotion. I turned to Evan. Tell them to leave. He stared at me. Dad, tell your wife and her parents to leave our house. Grant set down his glass. This is precisely the kind of irrational reaction Evan warned us about. I looked at him. What else did my son warn you about? Grant's expression shifted just slightly. Evan moved closer. Nobody is trying to hurt you. We're trying to make a plan. You made one without us. Because every time I bring up the future, you shut down. You have never brought up the future. I shouldn't have to ask permission to care about my parents, Care Ruth said. You told me I had until Monday to clear out my closet. Sloane's voice sharpened. Because the movers are available Tuesday. That was the moment. Not the measuring tape, not the bourbon, not even the lie about paying our bills. The movers were already booked. This was not a conversation. It was an eviction disguised as concern. I looked at Evan, waiting for him to see what he had become. He did not. Instead, he took a breath and said, Dad, this house will be mine eventually. Everyone knows that. Why spend the next 10 years fighting over changes that are going to happen anyway? Ruth covered her mouth. I felt something hot rise through my chest, then disappear. In its place came an extraordinary calm. When did you start waiting for me to die? I asked. His eyes widened. That's not what I said. It is exactly what you said. You simply used the word eventually. He looked toward Sloane. She gave him a small, impatient nod, urging him forward. That hurt more than I expected. My son needed permission from his wife to speak to his father. He squared his shoulders. You're twisting everything. I'm saying the practical thing. You and Mom are getting older. The house is valuable. Sloane and I can maintain it. We can protect it. We can keep it in the family. And where do your mother and I fit in this family? In the downstairs suite, Sloane said. Marcy smiled as though that settled it. I looked at each of them. Then I walked past Evan into the living room. Ruth followed me. Walter, I picked up her coat from the hook near the door. Put this on. Her hands trembled as I held it for her. Where are we going? Somewhere nobody has packed your clothes. Evan hurried after us. Dad, don't be ridiculous. You can't just walk out. I helped Ruth button her coat. You said you wanted to take over. I didn't mean tonight. Then consider this an early start. Sloane appeared behind him, her face annoyed rather than worried. What about dinner? We ordered from the Italian place. I almost admired the absurdity of the question. I took my car keys from the bowl by the door. You know where the plates are, Grant called after me. Running away only proves you are not prepared to handle this maturely. I opened the front door. The rain had turned steady and cold. I looked back once at Evan. He stood in the hallway of the house where I had taught him to tie his shoes, repair a bicycle chain, apologize after a lie, and stand up when someone smaller was being pushed around. He looked more irritated than ashamed. I realized then that I could not argue him back into being my son. So I said the only thing I could say, enjoy the space. Then Ruth and I walked into the rain. The cold soaked through my shirt before we reached the truck, but I barely felt it. I had spent most of my life repairing things other people threw away, washing machines, commercial dryers, boiler pumps, restaurant equipment, old wiring, broken locks. Around Knoxville, people knew me as the man who arrived in a faded work truck, listened to one wrong sound, and found the small failed part nobody else could see. Evan remembered the truck and the grease under my fingernails. He preferred to forget that one truck had grown into Blue Ridge Commercial Laundry Service with 63 employees and contracts across 4 states. When I sold the company at 61, I told him Ruth and I had enough to retire comfortably. That was true. It was not the whole truth. Our home on Maple Ridge Road was not a mansion. It was a 2-story craftsman with a wide porch, a deep backyard, and a basement that smelled faintly of cedar and laundry soap. I had rebuilt the porch railings with my own hands. Ruth had planted every hydrangea along the driveway. We had raised Evan there from the time he was 6. There were pencil marks inside the pantry door showing his height year by year. A dent in the kitchen floor marked the Mother's Day he dropped a cast-iron skillet while making Ruth pancakes. Every imperfect inch carried a life we had built honestly. And now my son was ashamed of every honest thing that had built him. I did not know where we were going until we reached the end of the street. That was the truth. I had spent my whole working life solving emergencies by locating the failed part. A burned relay, a blocked drain, a cracked belt, but families do not come with diagrams, and there was no replacement part for the sound my wife had made when Evan told her to empty her bedroom. Ruth sat beside me in silence, clutching her purse with both hands. Rain slid across the windshield in silver sheets. The old Ford pickup smelled faintly of canvas coffee and the peppermint gum I kept in the console. At the red light near the highway, she finally spoke. "Did we do something wrong?" I turned toward her. "Number. Not tonight. I mean with him." The light changed, but the car behind us did not honk. I remained still for another second. "We loved him," I said. "Maybe we rescued him too often. Maybe I mistook giving him a good start for teaching him how to stand. But no Ruth. We did not earn what happened tonight." She nodded without looking at me. I kept thinking he would stop them. I kept waiting for him to laugh and say they were joking. So did I. He watched Sloane tape my boxes. Her voice broke on the last word. I reached across the console and took her hand. "I know." We drove downtown to the Holston River Hotel, a brick building near the Old Market District, where Blue Ridge used to hold its annual employee Christmas dinner. It was comfortable, polished, and expensive enough that Ruth looked at me sharply when I pulled under the covered entrance. "Walter, no. We can go to the Hampton Inn by the interstate. We can stay here. We don't need to waste money because we're upset." That sentence, I said, is one reason I have loved you since 1979. She did not smile. Inside, the young man at the desk recognized my name from old company events. He gave us a corner suite overlooking the river and quietly sent up tea sandwiches and a small bag of toiletries after seeing that we had no luggage. The suite was not a palace. It had a sitting room, a bedroom, and wide windows through which the rain made the city lights look soft and distant. Ruth stood in the center of the carpet, as if she had been dropped into someone else's life. "You paid for 2 nights. I paid for a week." She stared at me. "Walter, we may need time." With what money? I took off my wet jacket and hung it over a chair. The question had been waiting for years, and I had known one day I would have to answer it more fully than I ever had. Ruth knew Blue Ridge had sold. Her name was on every account that mattered, and I had never denied her access to $1. She knew we had no mortgage, no debt, and more than enough in retirement accounts. What I had hidden was the full total, the final earnout, the warehouse properties, and the investment account that had grown quietly while we continued living the way we always had. I had told myself that exact numbers did not matter because our daily life would not change. That had been arrogance dressed as protection. "Sit down," I said. Her face tightened. "Is something wrong with our savings?" "No, the opposite." I took my phone from my pocket and opened the secure banking app I rarely checked in front of anyone. It required my fingerprint and a 6-digit code. I turned the screen toward her. She read the total twice. Then she sat down without meaning to. The account's property holdings and conservative funds added up to $9,840,000. That did not include the house. Ruth looked at the number, then at me. Her eyes did not fill with delight. They filled with hurt. You told me we had a little over 2 million after the sale. We did it first. The rest came later. The warehouse buyout. The service contracts. The investment growth. And you never thought your wife should know. I thought you knew we were safe. That is not the same thing. Number. The word was difficult, but it was necessary. No, it isn't. She stood and walked to the window. Below us, headlights moved through the rain. I clipped coupons while you had almost $10 million. You clipped coupons when we had $20, when we had 20,000, and when we had 2 million. I stopped trying to talk you out of it in 1996. That is not funny. I know. I gave her room to be angry. For years, I had watched wealthy men ruin their children by announcing fortunes too early. One of my former partners had given his 2 sons positions they had not earned. Within 5 years, one had stolen from the company, and the other had stopped speaking to him over a lake property. A hotel owner I knew had watched 3 adult daughters fight at their mother's funeral because each believed she deserved the better condo. I had become afraid of money changing the people I loved, so I hid the size of it. I told myself simplicity would protect our family. That night, looking at Ruth's reflection in the window, I understood that secrets also change a family. They leave empty spaces where trust should be. I was wrong not to tell you, I said. I believed I was keeping the money from becoming the center of our life. Instead, I made a decision for both of us. She remained silent. I am sorry. After a long while, she asked, Does Evan know any of this? Number. Nothing. He knew the company sold. I told him it gave us a comfortable retirement. She turned. He thought comfortable meant poor. He thought work boots meant failure. Ruth sat again slower this time. Would tonight have happened if he knew? The question hurt because there was no good answer. Maybe not, I said. But if knowledge of money is the only thing standing between respect and cruelty, then respect was never there. Ruth's phone began vibrating across the coffee table. The first message came from her older sister, Helen. Are you two all right? Sloan says you've decided to downsize because Walter is having trouble managing things. Ruth read it twice. Then another message arrived from our neighbor, Linda Carver. I didn't know you were leaving Maple Ridge. I'm so sorry. Evan says it's for your safety. A third notification came from the family group chat. Sloan had posted a photograph of Ruth's taped boxes beneath a caption, Sometimes loving aging parents means making the hard choices they resist. Proud of Evan for stepping up. The comments beneath it made my stomach turn. You two are saints. So many adult children abandon their parents. Ruth and Walter are lucky. One cousin wrote, I had no idea Walter was declining. Linda commented, Walter told me last month he planned to stay in that house forever. Her comment disappeared less than a minute later. Sloan had deleted it. Ruth sat very still, the phone glowing in her hands. They didn't just pack us, she said. They told everyone we were too confused to object. I reached for the phone, but she held it against her chest. No, let me see it. She read every congratulation, every expression of pity, every stranger's praise for the son who had never paid one of our bills. By the time she lowered the phone, her tears had dried. I want them to correct this, she said. Not quietly. I want the same people who were told we were helpless to hear the truth. They will. How? I don't know yet. She looked at me with a steadiness that had not been there when we left the house. Then make it part of whatever comes next. I nodded. Sloan believed she had already written the public version of our lives. She had no idea she would soon be required to erase it in her own handwriting. Ruth looked at the bank balance once more. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. That was another truth. I knew only that I would not return home and pretend the kitchen conversation had been a misunderstanding. I would not let Evan smooth the edges, blame Sloan, or offer some weak apology designed to preserve his inheritance. Before deciding anything, I needed facts. At 9 the next morning, I called Elena Park. Elena had been Blue Ridge's controller for 18 years. After the sale, she continued handling our investments, taxes, and property records. She was practical, discreet, and almost impossible to surprise. When she answered, I said, "I need you to clear your morning." There was a pause. "Is Ruth safe?" "She is." "What did Evan do?" That question told me she already knew enough to be afraid. Her office occupied the second floor of a renovated textile building near the railroad tracks. A framed photograph of the original Blue Ridge crew hung behind the conference table. In it, I was 32 holding a toolbox, while Ruth stood beside me with 6-year-old Evan on her hip. A red folder waited beneath the photograph. I told Elena about the boxes, the tape measure, the realtor, and the basement. She listened until Ruth repeated Evan's words. "The basement is good enough for them." Then Elena closed her eyes. "I should have called you 2 months ago." She opened the folder. Evan had contacted her claiming I had become forgetful and that he was beginning to manage our finances. He asked for account balances, property values, and information for us about the Blue Ridge sale. Elena refused to discuss anything without Ruth and me present. A week later, he sent her what he called the Maple Ridge Consolidation Plan. It was one ordinary spreadsheet. That made it more frightening than a stack of legal papers. The house was listed for an estimated $625,000. The money would pay Evan and Sloane's lease penalties, consolidate their debts, renovate the house, and reserve a deposit for senior care. At the bottom, he had assigned Ruth and me a $400 monthly allowance. "Allowance," Ruth repeated. Elena placed a Pine Meadow assisted living brochure beside the spreadsheet. A yellow note was stuck to the cover. "One room is enough. Memory wing later if resistance continues." The handwriting was Marcy Caldwell's. Elena had also saved the message in which Evan said his mother-in-law had already called Pine Meadow to ask about openings. Ruth touched the edge of the brochure. "They were never going to keep us in the basement." "No," I said. "The basement was only where they planned to place us while they took control, sold the house, and taught everyone else to call it care." I asked the only question that mattered next. "How desperate are they?" Elena turned one page. Evan and Sloane owed approximately $438,000. Credit cards, personal loans, 2 vehicle leases, a failed fitness startup, almost $182,000 lost through online sports betting. Ruth covered her mouth. The expensive apartment and Sloane's spending had helped create the pressure, but the gambling belonged to Evan. He had not been dragged into every choice. He had made many of them alone. "He tried to use Maple Ridge as collateral," Elena said. "The lender rejected the application because he is not on the deed. He described himself as your authorized family manager." "That is why they came yesterday," Ruth said. "The loan failed." Elena nodded. "And Bellwether Farm is in trouble. Grant has unpaid vendors and a large payment due in less than 3 weeks. He contacted a commercial lender using your name. He said his son-in-law would soon control valuable family property." Ruth stared at the spreadsheet, the brochure, and Marcy's note. "They promised our house to everyone. That was the whole scheme in one sentence. Evan needed the house to bury his debts. Grant needed it to save his venue. Sloane needed it to preserve the life she displayed online." Marcy had already selected the room where Ruth and I would eventually disappear. They had built a rescue plan around property they did not own, and 2 living people they had stopped seeing as human. For several minutes, none of us spoke. Outside the window, a freight train rolled slowly through the district, making the glass vibrate. I thought of Evan at 8 years old, sitting on a red stool in my garage, while I showed him how a loose wire could stop an entire machine. "Always trace the failure backward," I had told him. "The broken part is not always where the noise is." The noise in our family was Sloane's arrogance. The failure ran deeper. It ran through Evan's shame, his lies, his hunger to be seen as richer than he was, and my decision to keep believing that a stable childhood had given him a stable character. Ruth reached across the table and took my hand. What happens now? I looked at the spreadsheet again. The Caldwells had planned our allowance. They had selected our room. They had chosen the facility where we would eventually disappear. They had done all of it while sitting in our kitchen and drinking from our glasses. I did not want a lawsuit. I did not want months of hearings, accusations, and strangers discussing my family in public rooms. I wanted the truth spoken where the betrayal had begun. I'm going to give them what they think they want, I said. Elena studied me. What does that mean? They believe I am tired, confused, and afraid of conflict. They believe Ruth can be pressured. They believe the house is the prize. Ruth's fingers tightened around mine. It is not. The house matters, I said. But it is not the prize. I looked toward the photograph of our young family. The prize is knowing who they are when they think nobody can stop them. Elena understood before Ruth did. You want them to come back? Yes. And you want them to explain the plan. In their own words. Ruth's eyes sharpened. You want them to believe we agreed. I nodded. We are not forging anything. We are not tricking them into signing away rights they have. I want a simple family care plan. 1 page. Plain English. It will state that Evan, Sloan Grant, and Marcy recommended moving us into the basement, taking control of the house, selling it if necessary, and using the proceeds to manage our care. If they believe that plan is loving and reasonable, they should have no problem putting their names beneath it. Elena leaned back. And after they sign, we have a family meeting. With whom? Ruth asked. I looked at her. With the people they forgot were family. The person I called next was Natalie Brooks. Natalie was my younger sister's daughter. She was 34, worked as a pediatric home health nurse, and lived in Chattanooga with her husband Marcus, who taught automotive technology at a public high school. She had never asked us for money. That fact alone did not make her virtuous, but the small things did. She called Ruth almost every Sunday afternoon. She mailed handwritten birthday cards. When I had cataract surgery, she drove 2 hours after a 12-hour shift, stocked our refrigerator, and left before breakfast because she had patients waiting. 2 years earlier, when Ruth had knee replacement surgery, Natalie slept 3 nights in the recliner beside her hospital bed. Evan had sent flowers from an airport lounge and promised to visit once the quarter calmed down. He never came. Natalie answered on the second ring. Uncle Walt, is Aunt Ruth okay? That was always her first question. I told her enough to make her silent. When I finished, she said, I'm driving up. You're working today. I'll switch shifts. You don't have to rescue us. I know. That answer nearly undid me. She was not coming because she believed we were helpless. She was coming because she loved us. Come Saturday morning, I said. Bring Marcus. Don't tell Evan. Are you safe? Yes. Is Aunt Ruth with you? Yes. Then we'll be there. Before I called Evan Ruth, and I spent an hour talking through the plan. She was frightened by the idea of sitting across from them again. But anger had begun to replace her shock. They need to hear what they did, she said. Not from Elena. From me. At 11:30, I dialed my son. He answered before the first ring had fully ended. Dad. Where are you? Is Mom with you? His voice carried concern, but beneath it I heard urgency. He was afraid we had gone to the police, a lawyer, or a bank. We're at a hotel, I said. What hotel? That isn't important. Dad, this has gotten out of hand. Sloane's upset. Her parents are offended. We were trying to help. I closed my eyes. Even now, his first instinct was to center their feelings. I have been thinking, I said, making my voice sound tired. Maybe I reacted too quickly. Silence. What do you mean? Your mother and I are old enough to admit when a house has become too much. Ruth sat across from me. When I said the words, pain moved through her face, but she understood why. Evan's breathing changed. Exactly, he said gently. That's all I was trying to say. I know. The lie tasted bitter. We need to do it properly, I continued. No shouting. No assumptions. We'll meet at the house Saturday at 2. You, Sloane, Grant, and Marcy. Elena Park will be there to help us write down the arrangement. Elena, his voice tightened. She handles our finances. If we transfer responsibility, she needs to understand the plan. Did you tell her anything? I told her we need a family care agreement. He exhaled slowly. Okay, I want everyone there. Of course. And Evan, yes. Do not move or throw away anything else before the meeting. A pause. We only packed a few things. Do not touch another item. All right. His voice softened again. Dad, you're making the right decision. I know this is hard, but once everything settles, you and Mom will see that. I looked at Ruth. I'm sure we'll see a great deal. After I ended the call, she said, he sounded relieved. He thinks we surrendered. That's what hurts most. Not that he believed us weak, that he was happy about it. We spent Friday at the hotel. Ruth bought a change of clothes from a department store nearby. I purchased a simple navy suit, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted Evan to understand that the man sitting across from him on Saturday was not confused, frightened, or defeated. That evening, we ate room service soup beside the window and talked about our marriage, our choices, and the parts of Evan's childhood we had remembered differently. Ruth recalled the first time he came home ashamed of my work truck. He was 13. I had picked him up from a classmate's birthday party. 2 boys stood on the lawn watching as I pulled up in the Blue Ridge van, the one with a cartoon washing machine on the side. Evan climbed in without speaking. Halfway home, he asked why we could not own a normal car. I had laughed and said, "This one is normal. It starts every morning." Ruth remembered him crying later in his room because the boys called me laundryman. I told him honest work was nothing to be ashamed of, she said. So did I. But maybe shame doesn't listen to speeches. Number. Did we miss it growing? We saw pieces. At 16, he refused to let us host his birthday barbecue because he wanted dinner at a restaurant where the menu had no prices. At college, he stopped inviting roommates home. After he met Sloane, he began introducing me as retired from industrial operations instead of saying what I did. I had noticed. I had chosen not to confront him because I thought maturity would correct vanity. Instead, vanity found people who fed it. Grant Caldwell loved telling stories about clients with private jets, although he had never owned one. Marcy used the word curated to describe everything from cheese plates to grandchildren who did not yet exist. Sloane measured life in photographs, the right table, the right hotel lobby, the right handbag, resting casually where a logo could be seen. Evan had entered their world like a hungry boy entering a bakery. He had lied to stay inside, but no one had forced him to lie. That distinction mattered. At 9 that night, Ruth's phone rang. Evan's name appeared on the screen. She looked at me. Do you want me to answer? It is your son. She put the call on speaker. Mom. His voice was softer than it had been in the kitchen. Can we talk without Dad turning everything into a battle? Ruth's face changed. Your father is sitting beside me. A pause followed. Fine. I just need you both to understand tomorrow cannot become another scene. Grant and Marcy are trying to help. Sloane is embarrassed by the way Dad spoke to them. Ruth stared at the dark hotel window. Your wife packed my underwear into a box marked basement. I know it looked bad. It did not look bad, Evan. It was bad. He exhaled. Mom, please. The realtor, the movers, the locks, those were preparations. We thought if everything was ready, Dad would stop resisting long enough to see the logic. And if he still resisted, another pause. We would have needed outside support. What does that mean? A doctor? Maybe someone from the bank. People who could explain that refusing every reasonable option is not healthy. Ruth closed her eyes. You were going to tell them your father had lost his mind. I was going to say he was making emotional decisions. He is making one now, she replied. He is choosing not to let you steal his home. Mom, don't use that word. Which word would protect your feelings, take control, consolidate? Why are you doing this? His voice finally sharpened. I am trying to keep the family together. You changed the lock on the family. Silence. Then Evan said, please do not embarrass me tomorrow. Ruth gave a quiet laugh that hurt more than crying. You posted my boxes online and told people I was declining. You should have worried about embarrassment before Marcy labeled my winter clothes. Mom, tomorrow I am going to speak. You are going to listen. If that embarrasses you, perhaps shame is finally doing something useful. She ended the call. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Ruth placed the phone face down. I kept waiting for him to ask whether I had stopped crying. He never did. No. Her voice was steady. He only asked me not to make him look bad. That call removed the last temptation to soften the meeting before it began. On Saturday morning, Natalie and Marcus arrived at the hotel, carrying coffee, a small overnight bag, and a paper sack filled with Ruth's favorite blueberry muffins. The moment Natalie saw her aunt, she set everything down and wrapped both arms around her. Ruth held her for a long time. Marcus shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief hug without asking whether I needed one. He was a broad-shouldered man with patient eyes and a scar across one knuckle from years of working on engines before he became a teacher. What do you need us to do? He asked. Listen, I said. That may be enough. Natalie looked at the printed Maple Ridge consolidation plan on the coffee table. She read the $400 allowance twice. They were going to give you less each month than Sloan spends on hair appointments. Ruth gave a tired smile. Probably. Natalie turned to me. What happens to Evan after today? I don't know. You do know what happens to the money, though. An hour before Natalie arrived, Elena brought Miriam Cole, the local attorney who had handled the sale of Blue Ridge and prepared our wills years earlier, to the hotel. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. There was no complicated punishment clause and no theatrical legal trap. Ruth and I were of sound mind, sitting side by side deciding what would happen to what we had built. The old plan left 60% to Evan, 20% to Natalie, and 20% to a charitable fund that repaired appliances and heating systems for elderly homeowners. With 2 hotel employees witnessing our signatures, Ruth and I signed new wills. The new plan removed Evan entirely. Half would go to Natalie and Marcus, not as a prize, but as a responsibility. The other half would endow the Blue Ridge Senior Home Fund, which would pay local tradespeople to keep older residents safe in their own homes. Ruth would remain fully protected for life. So would I. The house would eventually pass to Natalie, with the request, not the legal demand, that she preserve the pantry height marks and the front porch chair my father had built. Natalie cried when I told her. I don't want it because Evan failed, she said. You are not receiving it because he failed. Then why? Because you understand that a home is not a prize you wait for someone to die and collect. She wiped her face. I would rather have you and Aunt Ruth for 20 more years than any house. That is why I trust you with it. At 1:30, we drove to Maple Ridge Road in 2 cars. The dumpster was no longer empty. From the driveway, I could see one of my old workshop shelves sticking above the rim. A rolled rug lay beside broken planters and 2 wooden dining chairs. Ruth gasped. He promised not to touch anything. I parked so quickly the truck rocked. Marcus caught my arm before I reached the dumpster. Let me look. He climbed the metal step and peered inside. Mostly garage items, he said. Some boxes, chairs. Nothing looks destroyed yet. Yet. The word mattered. I walked to the front porch and tried my key. It did not work. For one stunned second, I thought I had used the wrong key. Then I tried again. The lock had been changed. Ruth stood behind me. Number. I rang the bell. Evan opened the door wearing a new blue shirt and the expression of a host greeting difficult guests. Dad, you're early. I held up my key. Why doesn't this work? His eyes moved to the deadbolt. Sloan had the locksmith come this morning. She told him you had approved the change and that I was handling the transition. You told a locksmith I had authorized you. Evan looked away. The old lock stuck sometimes. It never stuck. We were going to give you new keys after the meeting. Sloane stepped into the hallway. The realtor was told the same thing. Everyone understands this is already agreed in principle. Ruth stared at her. Everyone except the people who own the house. A car door closed behind us. Linda Carver. Our neighbor from across the street was standing at the edge of the driveway with a covered casserole in both hands. She had lived across from us for 19 years. She had watched Evan leave for college, brought soup after Ruth's knee surgery, and trusted every word Ruth said more than anything posted online. Her face changed when she saw us on the porch. "Ruth Walter, I thought you had already moved." Ruth looked at the casserole. "Moved where?" Linda glanced at Evan, then at Sloane. "To Pine Meadow." Sloane said the family decided it was safest, and that you two were having trouble accepting the change. The shame on Evan's face lasted only a second before irritation replaced it. "Linda, this is a private family matter. You made it a neighborhood matter," I said, "when you told the neighborhood a lie." Linda looked horrified. "I am so sorry." The post said Walter had been forgetting bills and that Ruth was exhausted. "I brought dinner because I thought—" "We have not missed a bill," Ruth said. "We did not agree to leave. We spent last night in a hotel because our son and his wife packed my clothes and planned to put us downstairs." Linda's eyes filled. She turned to Evan. "You told my husband you were finally taking responsibility for them." Evan could not look at her. Sloane stepped forward. "People are misunderstanding language that was meant to protect Walter and Ruth's privacy." Linda's grip tightened around the casserole dish. "You posted a photograph of their boxes. That was meant to encourage other caregivers." "I am not your caregiving content," Ruth said. The sentence stopped everyone. Ruth walked down one porch step and took the casserole from Linda's hands. "Thank you for bringing this. We may need it later." Linda touched her arm. "Tell me what you need." "Anything. For now I need people to stop repeating that we chose this. I will correct everyone I spoke to." Evan finally looked up. "Please don't turn this into gossip." Linda stared at him with the disappointment of someone who remembered him as a boy. "Evan, gossip is what you gave us." "Your mother just gave me the truth." She crossed the street without another word. Ruth watched her go. "That is one neighbor," she said. "How many other people did you prepare to pity us?" Evan had no answer. We entered the house. Behind him I saw that the family portrait from the hallway had been removed. In its place hung a round gold mirror. Sloane walked into view. "You're here." "Good." "The caterer will arrive any minute." Caterer Ruth asked. For the signing, there were white flowers on my dining table. Champagne glasses stood beside a silver ice bucket. They had planned a celebration. Something in Ruth's face changed. I watched grief settle into dignity. She walked past Evan without asking permission, entered her own house, and lifted the gold mirror from the wall. Sloane blinked. "What are you doing?" Ruth carried the mirror into the living room and placed it carefully against a chair. Then she opened a closet and found our family portrait resting on the floor behind a vacuum cleaner. She rehung it on the nail. "This meeting has not happened yet," she said. "You have not inherited a wall." Nobody answered. Ruth walked into the pantry. A strip of blue painter's tape had been placed beside the pencil marks that recorded Evan's height from age 6 to 17. Sloane had written Sand plus Prime on it. Ruth peeled the tape away slowly. "This line is from the first week he lived here," she said. "He stood on his toes because he wanted to look 7. Evan remained near the front door. Another mark had Evan age 12 written beside it in my handwriting. Above that, a crooked line showed the year he grew almost 4 inches and complained that every pair of jeans became too short. Sloane leaned against the kitchen entrance. "We cannot preserve every scratch in the house." Ruth turned. "That is not a scratch. It is pencil on a pantry frame. It is my child growing up." Evan looked at the marks, then truly looked at them. For a second, the man in the expensive blue shirt disappeared, and I saw the boy who used to flatten his heels against that wood, while Ruth balanced a ruler on his hair. Then Grant's car turned into the driveway. The memory left Evan's face. His shoulders straightened. He became Sloane's husband again. Ruth ran one finger over the highest line. You did not even ask what any of this meant before deciding to sand it away. Sloane's answer was immediate. A home has to evolve. Ruth looked toward the basement door. No, people evolve. A home remembers what they are too embarrassed to admit. Natalie's phone buzzed. She looked down, then slowly turned the screen toward Ruth. Sloane had posted a photograph of our front porch on social media less than 20 minutes earlier. Across the picture, in elegant white lettering, she had written, "Our forever home. A new chapter starts today." The photograph had already collected dozens of hearts. In the comments, friends congratulated her. One asked when the renovation tour would be posted. Another wrote, "You finally got the family house." There was no mention of Ruth, no mention of me, no mention that the people who had built the life inside that house were standing in a hotel because Sloane had packed them for the basement. Ruth handed the phone back. She erased us before we even agreed to leave, she said. Sloane's cheeks colored. It was only a draft post. It was public, Natalie replied. Grant and Marcy arrived 5 minutes later. Grant wore a tan blazer and carried a leather folder. Marcy brought a bottle of champagne, better than anything she had ever brought to our house before. They greeted Natalie and Marcus with confusion. Sloane's eyes narrowed. "Why are they here?" "Natalie is family," I said. "This is private. It concerns our care, our home, and our future. We choose who hears it." Evan pulled me aside near the staircase. "Dad, why did you invite her? Why does it bother you?" "It doesn't. It's just unnecessary. Then you have nothing to worry about." He looked toward Elena, who had just arrived carrying a slim laptop case and 6 copies of the one-page agreement. His discomfort deepened. The caterer delivered trays of sandwiches, fruit pastries, and small crab cakes. Sloane arranged them across the kitchen island as though she were staging a photograph. Marcy popped the champagne before anyone had signed anything. The sound was bright and vulgar in the room. At 2 o'clock, we sat around the dining table. I took the chair nearest the window. Ruth sat beside me. Natalie and Marcus sat behind us, slightly apart from the table. Elena occupied the other end with her papers. Evan, Sloane, Grant, and Marcy faced us. For a moment, nobody spoke. I looked around the room. The table had belonged to Ruth's parents. One corner still bore a dark burn mark from a Thanksgiving candle in 1988. Evan had done homework there. He had opened college acceptance letters there. He had once sat in the same chair he occupied now and promised us he would never become the kind of man who forgot where he came from. Elena began. Walter and Ruth asked me to document the family's proposed care arrangement in plain language. This is not a deed transfer. It is not a contract to sell the house. It is a written summary of what each of you says you believe is best. Sloane frowned. When do we sign the transfer? After the plan is explained and everyone agrees on the facts, Elena said. Grant opened his leather folder. I brought a sample deed and a power of attorney package. We will not need those today, Elena replied. His mouth tightened. I said, first, I want to hear the plan from Evan. My son shifted in his chair. We already discussed it. Not with everyone present. He glanced at Natalie. This feels like an ambush. Sloane touched his wrist. Just explain it, sweetheart. That word sweetheart was delivered like an instruction. Evan took a breath. The plan is for Sloane and me to move into the house and take over the major responsibilities. Dad and Mom would move into the finished basement room so they have less space to maintain. We would manage utilities, repairs, transportation, and medical appointments. Would we pay rent? Ruth asked. He blinked. Number. Would you? Sloane answered. The care we provide would be our contribution. What care? Natalie asked. Sloane's eyes flashed. Meals, scheduling, supervision. My aunt has cooked for herself since before you were born. This is exactly why extended family should not be involved, Marcy said. I raised one hand. Let them finish, Evan continued. Eventually, if stairs or health become a problem, we would help Mom and Dad move to a community designed for seniors. Ruth looked at him. You mean Pine Meadow? His face went blank. Sloan recovered first. We researched several options. Did you research whether we wanted to leave? We were trying to prepare, and the house I asked. Grant leaned forward. The house should be transferred to Evan now. That allows him to invest in improvements and protects the property from future complications. What complications? Age, illness, confusion, sudden decisions. Decisions like refusing to give you my house. He smiled tightly. Walter, hostility does not help. What happens if the house is sold? Elena asked. Grant looked at Evan. Evan looked at Sloan. Sloan said, the proceeds would be used responsibly. Define responsibly. First, the house would be updated. Then, depending on the market, we might sell and purchase something more suitable for multi-generational living. What would happen to any remaining money? It would stay within the family, Grant said. Elena tapped the spreadsheet lying in front of her. Would it pay Evan and Sloan's debts? The room changed. Evan's face emptied. Sloan's mouth opened. Grant turned sharply toward Elena. What spreadsheet is that? The one Evan sent me. Marcy looked at her son-in-law. You sent financials. Evan's hand moved toward the paper, but Elena placed her palm over it. I asked a question, she said. Would money from Walter and Ruth's home be used to pay your debts? Sloan spoke slowly. Some consolidation might be sensible. Families help one another. Ruth stared at her. Your version of help is taking our bedroom, selling our home, paying your bills, and giving us $400 a month. Sloan's eyes widened. That number was preliminary. So you admit the plan. It was a planning exercise. Elena slid copies of the one-page summary across the table. Then read this. It says exactly what you have described. If it is accurate, sign it. If it is not correct, it. Sloan picked up the page. The summary was brutally simple. Evan Hayes, Sloan Hayes, Grant Caldwell, and Marcy Caldwell believe Walter and Ruth Hayes should surrender control of their residence because of age and anticipated decline. They recommend moving Walter and Ruth into the basement, while Evan and Sloan occupy the primary living areas. They anticipate selling or borrowing against the property if needed to pay family obligations and future senior care expenses. They acknowledge that Walter and Ruth did not request this arrangement before it was planned. They accept responsibility for recommending it. No jargon, no hidden clause, no trap disguised as a gift. Only the truth. Grant read it and pushed it away. This wording is accusatory. Which sentence is false, I asked. He said nothing. Sloan pointed to the line about debt. Family obligations could mean anything. It means yours, Ruth said. Evan looked at me. Dad, if I sign this, will you sign the house over? There it was. Not will you forgive me? Not, are you and Mom all right? The house. I let my shoulders sag. If everyone signs and confirms this is truly what you believe is best, then we will make our decision today. He heard yes because he needed to hear yes. Sloan signed first. Her name cut across the page in a large, confident sweep. Evan signed beneath her. Grant hesitated, then signed with the irritated flourish of a man who believed paperwork was beneath him. Marcy signed last. Elena collected the page. Sloan leaned back. Good. Can we finally move forward? I looked at Ruth. She placed her hand over mine. Then I looked at my son. Yes, I said. Now we can. Sloan reached for the champagne bottle. Then I think we should toast. No, Ruth said. Her voice was not loud, but Sloan stopped. Ruth stood slowly. She did not look like the woman I had found crying beside two boxes. Her hands were steady. Her shoulders were straight. For 44 years, she said, I have served meals at this table. I have cut birthday cakes here. I have sat up with sick children here. I have welcomed every person in this room into my home. She looked at Marcy. I washed the sheets in the guest room after you stayed for Evan's wedding. Because you said hotel detergent irritated your skin. Marcy looked away. Ruth turned to Grant. I drove you to urgent care when you slipped at Bellwether Farm because your wife was too upset to drive. Grant's mouth hardened. Then Ruth faced Sloane. I altered your wedding veil by hand because the seamstress canceled and you cried that the day would be ruined. Sloane folded her arms. What is the point of this? The point is that I treated you like family before you earned it. Yesterday, you treated me like furniture before I was gone. The room was utterly still. Finally, she looked at Evan, and you let them. He lowered his eyes. Ruth sat again. I wanted to take her hand, but I knew she did not need rescue in that moment. She needed to be seen. I turned to Elena. Show them the first page. Elena opened her laptop and rotated it toward the center of the table. The screen displayed a plain statement from the sale of Blue Ridge Commercial Laundry Service 7 years earlier. The purchase price was visible near the top, $11,200,000. Evan read it first. His eyes narrowed as though the numbers might rearrange themselves. Sloane leaned closer. What is that? The sale of my company, I said. Grant gave a dismissive laugh. Gross figures mean nothing. Debt taxes partners, Elena, I said. She changed the screen. The next page showed our current net assets, cash reserves, bond funds, retirement accounts, 2 warehouse properties, and a conservative stock portfolio. $9,840,000. No one spoke. The champagne bottle slipped slightly in Sloane's hand, knocking against a glass. Evan stared at me. You have almost $10 million. Yes. His face changed in a way I will never forget. First came disbelief, then injury, then calculation. Not remorse, not shame, calculation. You lied to me, he said. I felt Ruth's hand find mine under the table. I did not tell you the amount. You let me think you were struggling. We never told you we were struggling. You drove that old truck. It runs. You wore work clothes. I worked. You let Mom use coupons. At that, Ruth almost smiled. No one has ever successfully stopped me from using a coupon. Sloane set down the bottle. Her entire posture softened. Her eyes brightened. The woman who had called our basement cozy now looked at me as if she had just discovered a beloved relative. Walter, she said. Why didn't you tell us then? A new explanation arrived behind her eyes. This was a test, wasn't it? You wanted to see whether we would step up. I held her gaze. No. A test requires someone to set it. I came home early. You showed us who you were without any help from me. Her smile froze. Would the money have changed how you treated us yesterday? Of course. I mean, not because of the money, because we would have understood you had options. We had options when you thought we were poor. That's not what I meant. Grant leaned forward, recovering quickly. This actually makes the transition plan more important. Significant assets require coordinated family management. Evan is your son. With proper guidance, he can protect what you built. Natalie let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like disbelief. Grant glanced toward her. This is not amusing. No, she said. It is not. Evan's expression filled with something close to hope. So the house isn't the main thing. No, I said. He nodded rapidly, as if trying to rebuild the world in his head. Then none of this has to be ugly. We can fix it. Dad, I was under pressure. I thought the house was all you had. I thought if we handled it, everybody could breathe. You thought taking the only thing I had would help me breathe. I explained it badly. You packed your mother's clothes. Sloane did that. Sloane turned on him. You told me to start. I said we needed to organize. You booked the movers. You picked the date. Grant struck the table lightly with 2 fingers. This finger-pointing is childish. Walter, the important fact is that your estate should remain within your direct bloodline. Why, Natalie asked. Because that is how families preserve wealth. Your family was planning to use his house to cover your venue loan. Grant's face darkened. You know nothing about my business. Elena said, we know you approached First Volunteer Bank for a bridge loan and represented Evan's expected property as support. Marcy looked sharply at her husband. You said the lender was already comfortable. Grant ignored her. Evan looked from Elena to me. You checked our finances. You sent them to her, I said. That was private. So was my house. His face flushed. Sloane placed one hand on his arm, but her eyes remained fixed on the number displayed on the laptop. Walter. She said we all made mistakes yesterday. Emotions were high. But Evan is your only child. Whatever happened, everything you built is still for him someday. The room held its breath. I nodded once. It was. Evan's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. What do you mean was? I looked at my son. Until this morning, our plan left most of the estate to you. The color began to drain from his face. Most, 60%. The rest was divided between Natalie and a fund that repairs homes for older people who cannot afford the work. Sloane's lips parted. $6 million. She said it so softly it sounded like prayer. I continued. This morning your mother and I changed that plan. Evan stood so abruptly his chair scraped backward. Number. 1/2 will go to Natalie and Marcus. The other half will support the Blue Ridge Senior Home Fund. Number. The house will eventually go to Natalie. No. His fist struck the table. Champagne jumped in the glasses. Ruth flinched and Marcus rose halfway from his chair. I lifted one hand and Marcus sat again. Evan stared at me with wild eyes. You can't do that. Your mother and I signed the new wills last night. I am your son. You were also the person standing in my kitchen telling me my bedroom was no longer mine. That was one night. It revealed years. You're giving my life to her, he pointed at Natalie. She isn't your child. Natalie's face tightened, but she remained silent. I stood. Blood gave you a place in our home. It did not give you the right to dismantle it. Evan shook his head. This is punishment. You're angry, so you're destroying my future. You tried to finance your present by selling ours. Sloane rose beside him. Walter, be reasonable. Evan made a bad decision because he was scared. You cannot hand millions of dollars to a nurse and a shop teacher just because they send birthday cards. Marcus spoke for the first time. I teach automotive technology. Sloane stared at him. What? You called me a shop teacher as though teaching young people a trade were shameful. It isn't. This is not about you, no, Marcus said. It is about the fact that every honest thing looks small to you until there is money behind it. Sloane's face sharpened. I will not be lectured by a man who can repair what he owns, Ruth asked. Sloane turned back to me. Fine. Keep the charity. Give Natalie something. But cutting Evan out completely is insane. Ruth leaned forward. Forgetting a birthday is a mistake. Booking movers, changing locks, calling a realtor, and planning our allowance is not a mistake. It is a plan. Be careful with that word, Elena said. Sloane stopped. Elena lifted the signed family care plan. 10 minutes ago, all 4 of you put your names under a statement saying Walter and Ruth should surrender control because of age and anticipated decline. Now that you know they are wealthy, you suddenly consider Walter capable of managing almost $10 million. Grant's jaw clenched. That page is meaningless. It may be meaningless in court, Elena said. We are not in court. It matters here because it shows exactly what changed your opinion. She placed the page in front of him. The balance. Marcy stood. This is humiliating. Ruth looked at her. No, Marcy. Humiliation was reading praise for your family while sitting in a hotel because you had boxed my clothes. Marcy's face tightened. That post was Sloane's. The note on the Pine Meadow brochure was yours. For the first time, Marcy lost her polished expression. I was gathering options. You wrote memory wing later if resistance continues. You called to ask whether one room would be enough. You labeled my winter clothes with your own hand. Marcy glanced toward the box still visible near the living room doorway. I was trying to make the move efficient. You were making my disappearance efficient, Ruth said. I nodded to Elena. Show them the consolidation plan. The laptop screen changed again. This time, the estimate of Evan and Sloane's debts appeared. $438,000. Sloane's head snapped toward her husband. What is that? Evan did not answer. She moved closer to the screen. What is that number? It is the total from the statements Evan sent me, Elena said. Sloan looked at him. You told me we owed 160. I said the immediate problem was 160. You said the startup loss was temporary. It was supposed to be. Elena opened the detail page. The betting transfers filled half the screen. Sloan read the names of the services. Her face slowly lost all color. What are these? Evan's shoulders collapsed. Sloan, what are they? Sports accounts. How much? He said nothing. Elena answered, approximately $182,000 in net losses over 18 months. Sloan stepped backward as if he had struck her. You gambled away $180,000. I was trying to recover the startup money. With football games, I had a system. The words were so pitiful that even Grant closed his eyes. Sloan began to laugh. It was not amusement. It was the brittle sound of someone watching the floor disappear beneath her. A system. Evan stood too. You spent money as fast as I could make it, because you told me you could make it. You wanted the apartment. You said your family had money. You wanted the car. You said your father's business sale had set you up. I said he did well. You said this house was only the beginning. Every eye turned to Evan. He looked at me, cornered by his own words. What did you tell her? I asked. He rubbed both hands over his face. Dad, please. What did you tell your wife? Sloan answered for him. He said you were secretly wealthy. He said you lived simply because you were eccentric. He said when the time came there would be properties, investments, maybe $10 million. The irony moved through the room like cold air. Evan had lied to Sloan, yet by accident he had guessed close to the truth. He told you that before you married him, Ruth asked. Sloan looked at Evan with naked hatred. On our third date, Evan's voice rose. I was trying to impress you. You built our marriage on it. You married me because of it. Sloan did not deny the accusation. That silence was an answer. Grant stood and buttoned his jacket. This has become a disgusting family spectacle. We are leaving. Elena said, before you do, perhaps Sloan should know why her parents were so eager for the house transfer. Grant stopped. Marcy's head turned slowly toward him. What is she talking about? Elena displayed a short list of public liens, late vendor claims, and the upcoming loan deadline for Bellwether Farm. No secret investigators, no federal agents, no dramatic accusations. Just bills, deadlines, and public records that revealed a business operating on borrowed time. Sloan stared at the screen. Dad, Grant's face had gone gray. It is a temporary cash flow issue. How temporary? He said nothing. Marcy clutched the back of her chair. You told me the fall bookings covered everything. They will. 3 vendors filed claims. Administrative disputes. Elena looked at Marcy. The bank payment is due in 19 days. Marcy turned on her husband. You said Evan's property would clear the note. The sentence escaped before she could stop it. The whole room heard. Grant's eyes closed. Ruth's expression did not change. So that was the plan, she said. Our house would pay your daughter's debts and save your venue. Marcy sank into her chair. No one meant to hurt you. You put my winter clothes in a box, Ruth replied. People always say they did not mean harm after the harm stops benefiting them. Sloan looked from her father to Evan, then back to the $9 million balance still visible in a corner of the screen. She seemed to calculate every possible route to it. Finally, she faced me. You cannot seriously prefer Natalie to your own son. I prefer loyalty to entitlement. She barely knows how to manage her own life. Natalie's eyes flashed, but I answered first. She manages medication for sick children, works night shifts, keeps promises, and shows up when people are afraid. Those are useful skills for managing a legacy. Sloan's composure broke. This is absurd. We changed locks, we packed boxes, fine. We were aggressive. But families forgive mistakes. Ruth said families also respect boundaries. Evan moved around the table toward me. Dad, listen to me. I can fix this. Give me time. You had time. I was desperate. You were dishonest. I can go to counseling. I can stop betting. I can sell the car. Just don't do this. Do what? Give it away. Even then, with his mother shaking beside me and his marriage splitting open, the thing he named was the money. I looked at my only son and felt the last fragile hope inside me become quiet. The money is not you, I said. The house is not you. My work is not you. You were supposed to become a man, whether you inherited anything or not. His eyes filled with tears. That is easy for you to say. You already have everything. I built everything while having almost nothing. Sloane snatched her purse from the sideboard. I cannot believe this. She turned on Evan. You told me your father was a harmless old mechanic sitting on a fortune. You said all we had to do was wait. Ruth closed her eyes at the cruelty of it. Evan stared at his wife. You said you loved me. I loved the life you promised. The words landed harder than any shout. He looked as if someone had removed the bones from his body. Sloane continued, no longer trying to sound kind. You lied about the debt. You lied about the betting. You could not even inherit properly. Evan flinched. You married a future bank account. And you married an audience, she said. We both lied. For 1 second they saw each other clearly. It was ugly, but it was honest. Grant moved toward the door. Come on, Sloane. She looked at him. Come where? Back to the venue the bank is taking. Marcy gasped. Grant's face turned purple. This is not the place. No, Sloane said. This place was supposed to save all of us. She looked around our dining room as though it had betrayed her personally. Then she pulled off her wedding ring. Evan watched her. What are you doing? I am leaving. For tonight. For good. You cannot just... I can. There is nothing here for me now. She placed the ring on the table rather than throwing it. The quietness of the gesture made it colder. Evan looked at the ring. So that's all I was. Sloane picked up the champagne bottle, considered taking it, then set it down with a bitter laugh. You were a bad investment with good manners. She walked toward the hallway. At the family portrait, she stopped and stared at the younger version of Evan smiling between Ruth and me. For a moment, I wondered whether she felt anything. Then she said, you should have told me the truth before I wasted 5 years. Evan's answer was barely audible. You should have loved me before I had to lie. She left with her parents. The front door closed. The Mercedes pulled away first. Sloane's crossover followed. No one in the dining room moved. The crab cakes had gone cold. The champagne bubbles were disappearing. Evan stood beside this table staring at the wedding ring. His entire borrowed life had emptied out in less than 20 minutes. He looked at me. If not me, he whispered. Then who am I? I had no answer he was ready to hear. Natalie quietly gathered the untouched glasses and carried them to the kitchen. Marcus followed her, giving the three of us space without being asked. Elena closed her laptop and moved toward the front porch. Soon only Ruth, Evan, and I remained in the dining room. My son lowered himself into the chair Sloane had left behind. He picked up the wedding ring and rolled it between his fingers. I thought she would stay, he said. Ruth looked at him with exhausted disbelief. After everything that happened, that is what you are thinking about. I loved her. Did you? His head came up. Mom, you lied to her from your 3rd date. You bought things you could not afford. You turned our home into a promise you had no right to make. Maybe you loved being admired. Maybe you loved being chosen by people you thought were above us. But love, she shook her head. You have used that word too carelessly. Evan pressed the ring into his palm. I know I ruined it. You tried to ruin us, she said. He began to cry then, but quietly. No dramatic collapse. No desperate shouting. Tears simply gathered and fell while he stared at the table where his mother had served him thousands of meals. I remained standing. Why, Ruth asked. He did not answer. She moved closer. Look at me. Slowly he did. Why were you willing to put us in the basement? I wasn't thinking. You booked movers. I panicked. You changed our locks. Sloane arranged it. You allowed it. He closed his eyes. Ruth's voice broke. I need the truth from my son at least once today. Evan covered his face with both hands. For a long time, the only sound was the wall clock ticking near the china cabinet. Then he said I was ashamed. The word was muffled behind his fingers. I had expected greed, fear, or blame. Shame was underneath all three. Ashamed of what I asked, he lowered his hands. Of us. Ruth sat down as if the answer had struck her knees. Evan looked at me and years of resentment came out in a rush. You were always the man in dirty boots. The father who picked me up in a service van. The one who repaired everything instead of replacing it. We never went anywhere impressive. We rented the same little beach condo every summer. Mom packed sandwiches for road trips. You made me work in the warehouse during college while other kids interned at investment firms. You earned more in that warehouse than I paid myself at your age. That isn't the point. What is the point? The point is that I spent my whole life feeling small. Ruth stared at him. We gave you a safe home. I know. We paid for college. I know. We attended every game, every ceremony, every parent conference. I know, he shouted, then immediately looked ashamed. I know. That made it worse sometimes. How could love make it worse, she asked. Because you were good people, and I still wanted more. I hated myself for wanting it, so I decided the problem was you. Your truck. This house. The way Dad talked about work like it was sacred. The way Mom checked grocery prices. I wanted parents people would envy. I felt something inside me tear, but I kept my voice steady. So you invented them, he nodded. When I met Sloane, she asked what you did. I said you owned an industrial company. That was true. Then she asked whether you had sold it. I said yes. She assumed you were rich. And you encouraged that assumption. At first, I just didn't correct her. Then she invited me to Bellwether Farm. Grant talked about family legacy and generational wealth. He asked what I would inherit. I was embarrassed to say I didn't know. So you made up a number. I said maybe 10 million. Ruth let out a stunned breath. You guessed the truth. I know. He laughed once, a broken sound. That's the sickest part. I lied because I thought you were ordinary, and all along you had exactly what I claimed. No, I said. What you claimed was not what we had. He looked at me. You claimed money without work, status without responsibility, a future you could spend before it arrived. That was never what I built. He stared down at the ring again. After Sloane and I got engaged, everything grew. The wedding had to be bigger because her parents hosted events. The apartment had to look right. She said clients judged her. I got promoted, so I thought I could catch up. With loans, at first, and then gambling. He nodded. A man at work won $30,000 on a basketball tournament. He showed me the account. I thought if I could win one good bet, I could clear the cards. I won $9,000 the first month. That was how addictions often introduced themselves, not as disasters, but as solutions. I paid one card off, he continued. I felt like a genius. Then I lost 12, then 20. I kept thinking the next game would put me back where I started. Every loss made stopping feel impossible because stopping meant accepting the loss. So you borrowed more? Yes. Did Sloane know? Not the amount. She knew I bet sometimes. She liked it when I won. And Grant, he gave me tips. Then Bellwether started having trouble. He said once I controlled the house, we could get a loan, fix the venue, pay off my debt, renovate this place, and nobody would ever have to know. Ruth looked physically ill. You were going to mortgage our home, sell it if necessary. The honesty of the admission was almost worse than another lie. Where would we go? She asked. He stared at his hands. Pine Meadow. The room became cold. Immediately I asked, No. You would stay downstairs for a while. Sloane thought if we established that we were caring for you, it would be easier to convince everyone the move was your choice. Everyone. Neighbors. Family. The people at your bank. Ruth's eyes filled again. You were going to build a story around us. He nodded. That we were declining. Another nod. That we needed supervision. Yes. I moved closer until I stood directly across from him. Did you believe any of it? He looked up. Number. That answer removed the last excuse. He had not misunderstood our condition. He had intended to manufacture it. Ruth rose. For a moment I thought she might leave the room. Instead, she crossed the small distance between them and slapped him once. The sound cracked through the house. Evan's head turned with the force of it. A red mark rose on his cheek. Ruth's hand trembled afterward. That is for packing my life while I was still living it, she said. For telling people I was confused. For planning where I would disappear. Evan did not touch his face. I do love you, he whispered. Ruth's expression broke, but she stepped back before he could reach for her. I still love you, she said. That is the worst part. But you do not get to hide inside my love today. Mom, do not touch me yet. The word yet passed through him like both a wound and a thread of hope. You do not get to blame Sloane. Ruth continued. You do not get to blame Grant. You chose this. If you ever hold me again, it will be after you have begun carrying the weight you tried to place on us. Evan bowed his head. I understand. No, she said. You understand the words. Now you have to live long enough to understand what they mean. She returned to her chair on her own. I watched her and felt no victory. Justice can tell you exactly where to draw a line. Love is what makes your hand shake while drawing it. After a long silence, Ruth wiped her face and looked at me. What now? Evan turned too. Fear returned to his expression. I had spent Friday night deciding the answer. Elena, I called. She entered from the porch, followed by Natalie and Marcus. Evan sat again. I remained standing. The inheritance is gone, I said. That is permanent. He flinched but nodded. You will never receive the house the company precedes or a position managing the family fund. Not after 5 good years, not after an apology, not after a grandchild. I will not use money to purchase your improvement. His face crumpled slightly. I understand. I'm not finished. He straightened. You have 2 choices. The first is that you leave today. Elena documents the loan application. The false claim that you managed our finances, the changed locks, and the plan to pressure us into surrendering the property. We notify the bank, your employer if necessary, and anyone else whose name or trust you used. You face whatever consequences follow without our protection. He went pale. I had no interest in inventing criminal charges or threatening prison as theater. But he had crossed real lines. He had represented himself as authorized to use property he did not own. He had used my name to approach lenders. He had tried to build a false account of our mental condition. Those actions could not simply vanish because he was my son. What is the other choice, he asked. The other choice is not forgiveness. It is work. He waited. First, you enter treatment for gambling addiction. Inpatient, if that is what the counselor recommends. No secret apps, no private accounts, no excuses. He nodded quickly. Yes. Second, you tell your employer enough truth to step away responsibly. If they keep you, that is their choice. If they do not, you find honest work. Any honest work. Yes. Third, you surrender the leased car and the downtown apartment and stop performing a life you cannot afford. Yes. Fourth, you cooperate with the divorce. You do not harass Sloane, threaten her, or chase her family trying to rebuild what was never real. His eyes moved toward the ring. Yes. Fifth, you create a repayment plan for every debt. I will not pay it. Your mother will not pay it. Natalie will not pay it. The family fund will not pay it. You will meet with a non-profit debt counselor, sell what can be sold, negotiate what can be negotiated, and pay what you owe from what you earn. His voice was smaller. That could take the rest of my life. Then the rest of your life will have structure. He closed his eyes briefly. Sixth, you will repair our names before you repair anything in this house. You will call the realtor and cancel the walkthrough. You will call the locksmith and admit that I never authorized the change. You will write in the family group chat that your mother and I are competent, financially independent, and have never received monthly support from you. You will state that the post praising you for stepping up was false. His face tightened. Everyone will know. That is the point. You were willing to humiliate us publicly because the lie made you look generous. The truth does not become private simply because it makes you look cruel. He looked at Ruth. She did not soften. I'll do it, he said. And seventh, I said, you will leave the main house. He looked at me. Where do I go? I let the question settle. The basement. His face froze. Ruth inhaled sharply, though she knew the condition. The room beside the laundry area, he asked. The one with the narrow window. He stared at me. You said, I said you would leave the main house. I did not say I would put you on the street. Natalie folded her arms, watching him carefully. You will live downstairs as a tenant, I continued. Not as an heir. Not as the man of the house. Not as someone waiting for us to weaken. He swallowed. What is the rent? Labor. He blinked. You changed our locks. You will replace them and give every key to your mother. You filled the dumpster. You will remove each item, clean it, and return what can be saved. You will repair the damage caused by moving furniture. You will maintain the yard, the gutters, the plumbing, and the ordinary things you believed happened by magic while you were growing up. He looked toward the basement door. You will learn what it takes to keep a home standing before you ever speak about owning one again. His mouth opened, but no words came. This is not revenge, I said. It is the closest thing I can offer to mercy without pretending nothing happened. He looked at Ruth. She was crying again, but she nodded. Do you accept? I asked. He stared at the dining table. The signed care plan, the wedding ring, and the cold food prepared for a celebration that had become a funeral for his old life. Finally, he said, yes. Say it clearly. Yes, I accept. Elena placed a blank notebook in front of him. Then write down what you admitted, she said. Not for a courtroom. For yourself. Every lie, every debt, every person you used. You will take that notebook to treatment. Evan looked at her, then at me. Now, I said. He picked up a pen. His hand shook so badly the first line wandered across the page. When he finished, Elena placed his phone in front of him. Condition 6, she said. Evan called the realtor first. The woman answered brightly, until he told her the Monday walkthrough had never been authorized by the owners. No, he said, looking at me as he spoke. My parents did not agree to sell. I represented the situation falsely. Please remove the address from your schedule and your internal notes. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. The locksmith was harder. Evan had to admit that he had claimed to be acting with my permission. He offered to pay for the original hardware to be restored and asked the company to note that only Ruth or I could authorize future work. Then came the family group chat. His thumbs hovered above the screen. Finally, he typed, I need to correct what Sloan and I posted. My parents are not mentally declining. They did not ask us to take over their home. They pay their own bills and have never depended on me for monthly support. Yesterday, without their consent, I helped pack my mother's belongings, planned to move both of them into the basement, changed their locks, and arranged a realtor visit. I did this because I was in debt and wanted control of their property. The story that I was stepping up was false. I was trying to take what was not mine. He read it aloud. No one rescued him from the silence afterward. Post it, Ruth said. He pressed send. The first response came from Helen. Ruth, I am so sorry I believed the other story. Then Linda Carver. Walter and Ruth, we love you. Please tell us what you need. A cousin asked Evan whether his account had been hacked. He answered, no. This is the first honest thing I have posted about my parents. Ruth took the phone from him. She did not read the apologies praising her strength. She scrolled back to Evan's correction and studied her own name written beside the truth. "They can see us again," she said. Evan lowered his head. It was not enough to repair what he had done, but it was the first consequence that cost him the image he had protected at our expense. While he sat with the replies, Marcus went outside and climbed into the dumpster. Natalie helped Ruth unpack the boxes beside the couch. Elena called a treatment center recommended by a counselor she trusted. I walked through my house. In our bedroom, Sloane had removed Ruth's quilt and replaced it with a white coverlet still folded in plastic. Our photographs were stacked face down on the dresser. A printed design plan lay on the bed. Primary suite concept. Below the title was a photograph of a room so pale and polished that nobody seemed to live there. I carried the plan downstairs. Evan sat with his phone face down beside the notebook. I placed it in front of him. "Tear this up." He looked at the picture of the bedroom he had intended to take. Then he tore it in half. He kept tearing until the pieces were too small to read. By 6 that evening, the celebratory food had been packed into containers. Natalie and Marcus had returned the chairs from the dumpster. Ruth's winter clothes were back in her closet. The gold mirror leaned against the wall, waiting to be removed. Evan stood near the basement stairs with one suitcase. The rest of his belongings remained in the downtown apartment he could no longer afford. He looked at us. "I'll call the treatment center in the morning." "No," Elena said. "They have a bed tonight." His fear returned. "Tonight? You said you accepted," I reminded him. He nodded. Marcus offered to drive. Before they left, Evan moved toward Ruth as if to hug her. He stopped halfway, unsure whether he had the right. Ruth did not cross the distance. "I love you," she said. "That is why I will not save you from this. Finish the work you agreed to begin." He nodded, crying without trying to hide it. I did not hug him. I held out the old brass house key he had used before changing the locks. He looked confused. "This key no longer works," I said. "Tomorrow a locksmith will restore the original hardware. When you come back from treatment, you will enter through the side basement door. You do not enter the main house without knocking until we say otherwise." He closed his fingers around the useless key. "I understand." Marcus guided him toward the car. At the end of the walkway, Evan turned. "Dad!" I waited. "I'm sorry." I believed he felt sorry. I did not yet believe he understood. "Go do the work," I said. He got into the car. Ruth and I stood on the porch until the taillights disappeared. Then she leaned against me. "The house feels different." "It is different. Are we going to be all right?" I looked through the front window at Natalie gathering discarded family photographs from the floor. Elena was washing champagne glasses. The signed care plan rested alone on the dining table. "Yes," I said. "But not because everything will go back to the way it was." Ruth looked up at me. "Because it won't, because it shouldn't." The next morning began with the sound of broken glass. Ruth had opened the cabinet where she kept her mother's blue serving bowl and found it cracked in 2 pieces. Sloane had apparently shoved a stack of new champagne flutes into the cabinet without looking. The bowl had survived 4 moves, countless holidays, and 1 fall from a picnic table when Evan was 10. It had not survived 1 afternoon of Sloane rearranging our kitchen. Ruth stood at the counter holding both halves. I expected tears. Instead, she said, "Get the glue from your workshop. The repair will show." "I know. It won't be safe for food. Then I'll put flowers in it." I found the 2-part epoxy, cleaned the edges, and joined the bowl carefully, while Ruth held it steady. A thin, dark line remained across the center. She ran 1 finger over it after the glue dried. "Some things don't become what they were," she said. "But they can still hold something beautiful." That bowl stayed on our kitchen windowsill from then on. In spring, it held daffodils. In summer, basil. During winter, Ruth filled it with pine cones and cinnamon sticks. It became the first honest symbol of our new family life. The weeks after Evan entered treatment were not triumphant. They were quiet, tiring, and full of ordinary consequences. The locksmith restored our old brass hardware. Marcus and I spent 2 days sorting through the dumpster. We saved most of my workshop shelves, both dining chairs, Ruth's planters, and several boxes of Evan's childhood belongings that Sloan had labeled Donate. One box held his Little League glove, his first science fair ribbon, and a clay handprint he made in 2nd grade. Ruth sat on the garage floor with the handprint in her lap. She threw this away. Evan let her. That is what I meant. We did not put the box back in the attic. Ruth placed it on the basement desk where Evan would see it when he returned. Natalie and Marcus stayed for a week. They cooked, cleaned, and helped us undo the rushed changes. Then on their last evening, Natalie asked whether we would consider something larger. She and Marcus had been planning to move closer to Knoxville because Marcus had applied for a teaching position at the County Technical Academy. Natalie's home health agency also had an opening nearby. We could rent somewhere, she said, but Aunt Ruth keeps saying the upstairs is empty. Ruth tried to appear casual and failed. The rooms are empty. Natalie looked at me. We would pay rent. No, I said. Then we would pay utilities and groceries. You are not moving in to become our caretakers. We know. Marcus nodded. We would be moving in because we like you. That made Ruth laugh for the first time since the boxes. They moved in 3 weeks later. Before they arrived, Natalie told us she was pregnant. Only 10 weeks. Too early, she said, to make a fuss. Ruth made enough fuss for the entire state of Tennessee. The upstairs room that Sloan had claimed for an office became a nursery. Not a curated nursery. A real one. The crib came from Marcus's sister. The rocking chair was the same chair Ruth had used with Evan, sanded and refinished by Marcus. Natalie chose soft green walls because she did not want to know whether the baby was a boy or girl. Ruth painted tiny yellow stars along the window trim. Laughter returned to Maple Ridge Road 1 room at a time. Evan's first letter from treatment arrived 12 days after he left. It was 6 pages long and almost impossible to read because his handwriting became worse whenever he grew emotional. He wrote that the counselors did not let him call gambling investing. They did not let him blame Sloan's spending. They did not let him describe the house plan as a family misunderstanding. They made him read his notebook aloud. He wrote, "I kept waiting for somebody to tell me I was not as bad as the things I did. Nobody did. They said I am responsible for becoming better, but being sorry does not erase the person I was when I hurt you." Ruth read the letter 3 times. I read it once and placed it in my desk. "Are you going to answer?" she asked. "Not yet. He asked whether you hate him. I don't. Then tell him." "I'm not ready to tell him what I do feel." Ruth nodded. She did not press. On day 21, I sent 1 sentence. "Finish the program, tell the truth, and stop trying to control the ending." His reply came 2 days later. "Yes, sir." Sloan filed for divorce before Evan completed treatment. Her first demand relied on the house and the family resources Evan had promised her. Both disappeared the moment someone asked what he actually owned. Bellwether Farm missed its loan payment soon afterward. The venue closed, Grant blamed everyone except himself, and Marcy moved in with her sister while describing the collapse as restructuring. I did not celebrate any of it. Their losses did not restore Ruth's dignity. They did not make Evan honest. They merely removed the expensive scenery around the people they had always been. Building peace would take longer. Evan completed 45 days of treatment. Marcus drove with me to pick him up. The facility stood in the foothills east of town, a low brick building, surrounded by bare trees. Evan came through the front doors carrying 1 duffel bag and the old notebook Elena had given him. He had lost weight. His expensive haircut had grown uneven. He wore jeans, a plain gray sweatshirt, and the same shoes he had arrived in. For the first time in years, no visible label announced who he wanted strangers to believe he was. He approached the truck slowly. "Hi, Dad. Evan." Marcus took his bag and put it in the back. "How are you?" Marcus asked. Evan considered the question. "Not fixed." Marcus nodded. "That's more honest than great." The ride home took 50 minutes. Evan told us the treatment center had helped him arrange weekly group meetings and a counselor in Knoxville. He had closed every betting account. His phone had blocking software. He had given Elena permission to monitor the repayment account he would open once employed. I listened without praising him. Those were necessary steps, not heroic ones. When we turned onto Maple Ridge Road, he became quiet. The dumpster was gone. The hydrangeas had been trimmed. Marcus had repaired the loose mailbox post. Through the upstairs window, pale green nursery walls were visible. Evan looked at the second floor. Who moved in? Natalie and Marcus. His face tightened, then relaxed. Of course. There was bitterness in the words. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. "You may feel whatever you feel," I said. "You may not punish anyone else for it." He stared ahead. "I know." Ruth waited at the side basement door. When Evan got out of the truck, he stopped several feet from her. For 45 days, she had kept the promise she made in the dining room. She had loved him without allowing him to hide inside that love. Now she crossed the distance. She hugged him. Evan made one broken sound and held her carefully, as though any pressure might make the moment disappear. "This is not forgiveness," she whispered. "This is me recognizing that you came back to do the work. I know. Do not make me regret opening this inch. I won't ask for more than I earn." Then she stepped back. Natalie stood a few feet away. Her pregnancy was beginning to show. Evan noticed. "You're pregnant." "Yes. Congratulations." "Thank you." The exchange was polite and painful. She handed him a new key. "This opens the side door only." He closed his hand around it. "Understood." The basement room was clean but spare. A single bed, a dresser, a small table. The childhood box rested on the desk. The clay handprint sat on top. Evan stopped when he saw it. "I thought this was gone." "It was in the dumpster," Ruth said. He looked at her. "I didn't know." "You did not look." He nodded slowly. "No, I didn't." That evening, we ate dinner upstairs without him. Ruth had set an extra plate by habit, then removed it before the meal began. She cried in the pantry, where she thought no one could hear. I followed her. "He came home from treatment," she whispered. "How do I let him eat alone?" "By remembering why he is downstairs. He is still our son." "Yes." "Does Mercy have to feel this cold?" "No. But boundaries often do at first." She leaned against the pantry shelf. "I'm afraid we will become cruel while trying not to be weak." That fear lived in me too. I took her hand. Then we watch each other. If punishment becomes entertainment, we stop. If his humiliation becomes the goal, we stop. But if discomfort is part of learning responsibility, we do not rescue him from it. She nodded. We packed a portion of dinner into a container and placed it on the basement stairs without a note. The container was washed and returned the next morning. Evan found work within a week, not at his former company. He resigned after admitting that his personal debt and gambling had affected his judgment. They accepted the resignation quietly. The new job was at Ridgeway Hardware and Paint, a family-owned store near the highway. He stocked shelves, mixed paint, loaded mulch, delivered appliances, and helped customers locate screws he once would not have known how to name. He earned $17 an hour. On his first morning, he came upstairs at 6 in clean jeans and an old Blue Ridge work jacket I had left hanging near the basement door. He stood in the kitchen while I drank coffee. "Can I borrow this?" I looked at the jacket. My former company logo was faded over the pocket. "You can wear it. I'll give it back." "Then you are borrowing it." He almost smiled. The expression vanished quickly. "Thank you." At 6:15 every evening, the side door opened. At first, Evan returned angry and exhausted. His back hurt. His hands blistered. Customers spoke to him impatiently. A supervisor 10 years younger corrected him in front of others. He complained once at dinner downstairs to Ruth, who had gone to check the smoke detector. I managed a 12-state sales region, he said. Now a kid named Cody tells me how to stack primer. Ruth answered, then stack primer well enough that Cody stops correcting you. He never complained to her again. His first assignment at home was replacing the lock set he had ordered removed. I put the old brass pieces on the workbench and made him clean each one. He watched online tutorials, asked Marcus for advice, and spent 3 hours correcting a misaligned strike plate. When the front door finally closed smoothly, he handed every key to Ruth. She kept one and gave one to me. He waited. You have the basement key, I said. I know. He looked at the restored lock. I'm sorry I changed it. Good. He seemed disappointed that I did not say more. Apologies had been his old way of ending discomfort. I wanted him to learn that some apologies begin work rather than conclude it. The next weekend, he climbed into the attic to replace insulation compressed by years of storage. The weekend after that, he cleaned gutters with Marcus. He repaired fence boards, serviced the lawnmower, and learned to shut off the water before removing a faucet valve. He made mistakes. He bought the wrong size filter. He spilled half a gallon of ceiling paint. He stripped a screw in the porch railing and cursed loudly enough for Ruth to hear. But he returned to each job. That mattered. One night I heard a steady drip from the kitchen sink. I checked the clock. 6:14. At 6:15, the side door opened. Evan crossed the backyard carrying his lunch cooler. His shoulders sagged. White paint dust covered his boots. I went to the basement. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, removing his shoes. He stood when he saw me. Dad, the kitchen faucet is leaking. He looked tired enough to sleep standing. Which side? Cold. Probably the cartridge. That is my guess. I'll look now. He put his boots back on. At the top of the stairs, I said, Your mother made chicken and dumplings. He stopped. There is a bowl for you on the stove. His face changed. Am I allowed to eat upstairs? Fix the faucet first. He nodded. It took him 40 minutes. He removed the handle, replaced a worn seal, cleaned the mineral buildup, and tightened everything without scratching the sink. When he turned the water on, the drip was gone. I inspected the work. Good. One word. His eyes filled anyway. We ate chicken and dumplings at the kitchen table. Not the dining table. Not a family ceremony. Just 2 men at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. He did not speak much. Neither did I. Before he returned downstairs, he washed both bowls. The next Sunday, Natalie invited him to dinner with everyone. I almost objected. She said, he lives here. He is doing the work. Isolation can become shame, and shame is where his lies started. You think 6 weeks is enough? No, I think 1 meal is 1 meal. Ruth looked at me with hope. So Evan joined us. He sat at the far end of the table, the chair Grant had once taken without asking. He listened while Marcus described a student rebuilding an old transmission. He asked Natalie whether she needed shelves installed in the nursery. He complimented Ruth's cornbread and did not mention the inheritance, the debt, or Sloan. After dinner, he cleared the table without being asked. It was not redemption. It was a beginning small enough to be believable. For the first time, I thought the worst confrontation might be behind us. 3 months after Evan returned, Sloan drove back into our yard with a cardboard box of his belongings. Evan and I were beside the riding mower. He went rigid when he saw her, but he did not walk toward the car. Their temporary agreement required all contact to go through a mediator. Sloan crossed the grass anyway. You look different, she said. Evan wore faded jeans, a Ridgeway work shirt, and grease across one cheek. I am different today. She set the box down. Inside were books, cufflinks, wedding photographs, and the navy suit he had worn at the family meeting. I need the last divorce papers signed, she said. And I need to know whether your father is still serious about the will. Evan looked at me, then back at her. He is, even after treatment. Yes, her mouth tightened. Then what exactly are you working for? He glanced toward the narrow basement window. My paycheck. My debts. a life that is actually mine. You live beneath your parents. I live in the room I chose for them." She stared at him. For a moment, I saw her searching for the old Evan, the man who would promise a trip, a car, or a future inheritance to stop her disappointment. He did not appear. "I could have forgiven the gambling," she said. "With what money?" he asked. Her face hardened. "That is cruel. It is honest." She turned to me. "There is truly no chance you will put him back in the will. Number. Not even if he changes. His change cannot be purchased with the possibility of millions." She shook her head. "You people worship suffering," No Ruth said from the porch. "We respect effort. You only respected effort when it bought something you could photograph." Sloan looked at Evan one last time. "Do you miss me?" He considered the question. "I miss the person I pretended to be when I thought your approval was love." That answer wounded her more than anger would have. She returned to the car without saying goodbye. The divorce became final the following month. There was no courtroom spectacle. The leased cars went back, the remaining furniture was sold, and almost nothing remained to divide. Evan donated the Navy suit to a program that provided interview clothes for men leaving addiction treatment. He sold the cufflinks and placed the money in his debt account. Then he returned to the mower. When the engine finally started, he smiled at the sound, not because anyone was watching, but because he had learned how to make something broken run again. The baby arrived during a thunderstorm. Natalie's water broke at 2 a.m. Marcus drove her to the hospital while Ruth followed in our car. I stayed behind because someone had to wait for updates and because the sight of hospitals had never agreed with me. Evan woke when he heard the commotion. "What happened?" "The baby is coming." He looked toward the driveway. "Should we go?" "Your mother went." We sat in the kitchen under the yellow light above the stove. Rain struck the windows just as it had the night Ruth and I left the house. At 4:15, Marcus called. A girl, 6 pounds 2 ounces, healthy lungs. Natalie was exhausted but safe. They named the baby Lily Ruth Brooks. Ruth cried so loudly over the phone that Marcus had to move it away from his ear. Evan stared at the table. They used Mom's name. "Yes," he wiped his eyes. "I'm happy for her." "I know." He looked toward the stairs leading to the nursery. "Will I be allowed around the baby?" "That is Natalie and Marcus's decision." He nodded. "I understand." The next afternoon they brought Lily home. Evan waited in the basement until Natalie asked for him. He came upstairs wearing a clean shirt and carrying a small wooden mobile he had made in Marcus's school workshop. It had simple shapes, a wrench, a star, a bird, and a tiny house sanded smooth and painted in soft colors. "I didn't know what babies like," he said. "Neither do babies," Marcus replied. "They mostly like milk and causing panic." Natalie laughed, then placed Lily in Evan's arms. His entire body went still. The baby opened one dark eye, decided he was unimportant, and went back to sleep. Evan looked down at her with terror and wonder. "Hi," he whispered. "I'm your cousin Evan." Natalie corrected him gently. "You're Uncle Evan if you want to be." He looked at her. "After everything, being an uncle is not an inheritance. It is a job." He nodded, tears gathering. "I want the job." "Then show up." Ruth stood beside me, watching her son hold the baby. She slipped her hand into mine. For the first time, I understood that our family was not returning to its old shape. It was building a new one around the broken places. That did not erase what Evan had done. It gave him somewhere to practice becoming different. 6 months after the day of the boxes, Sunday dinner became a household tradition. The table was set for 6, though Lily mostly slept in a bassinet beside Natalie. Marcus told stories about his students. Ruth argued that babies needed socks even when the room was warm. Natalie ate with one hand and held a bottle with the other. Evan no longer sat at the farthest end. He sat beside Marcus, close enough to pass the potatoes. He had received a small raise at Ridgeway after taking over appliance deliveries and basic repair intake. He still attended 2 recovery meetings a week. He still handed Elena a monthly budget. He had not gambled. I knew because he told us when urges came. That honesty mattered more than pretending the urges were gone. After dinner one Sunday, Evan followed me to the front porch. The evening air smelled of cut grass and honeysuckle. I sat in the rocking chair my father had built. Evan remained standing until I pointed toward the other chair. He sat. For a minute, we listened to tree frogs in the ditch. Then he took 2 envelopes from his pocket. "The first is for Natalie and Marcus," he said. It was thick. "What is it?" "My overtime from the last 2 weeks. $480. Lily needs a new car seat soon." "You do not owe them a car seat." "I know. I want to contribute." "That is different." He placed the envelope on the small table between us. "The second is for the debt account." This envelope was thin. "How much?" $125. He almost apologized for the amount, then stopped himself. "It is what I could pay after the counselor's plan and my regular bills." I opened the envelope. Inside was a money order and a handwritten note listing the remaining balance. $437,875. At that rate, neither of us would live to see the debt disappear. "You understand this may take decades," I said. "Yes. You understand some creditors may never be paid in full even if you do everything right." "Yes." "Then why write the full number every month, so I don't turn it into a vague problem again?" I folded the note and put it in my shirt pocket. "1 payment down." He nodded. "A lot to go." "A great deal." He accepted the words without flinching. Then he looked toward the yard, where the first straight lines from his mowing were visible in the fading light. "Dad." "Yes." "Do you think I'll ever be your son again?" The question entered me slowly. "You never stopped being my son." His face tightened with emotion. "But being my son does not automatically make you trustworthy. It does not make you honorable. It does not make you family in the fullest sense of that word." He looked down. "I know. You are rebuilding those things." He raised his eyes. "Am I?" "Yes." It was the first time I had said it. He pressed his lips together and nodded. "Thank you." "Do not thank me. Keep going." He smiled slightly. "Yes, sir." Inside the house, Lily began to cry. Ruth called for a clean bottle. Marcus dropped something in the kitchen. Natalie laughed. The sounds came through the screen door, warm and imperfect. Evan stood. "I should help. That would be wise." He reached for the door, then paused. "The porch step is loose again." "I noticed. I'll fix it tomorrow after work." "Use treated lumber." "I already bought it." He went inside. I remained in the rocking chair with the small envelope against my heart. I was not ready to restore what had been lost. I was beginning to believe something new might be built. A year after I found Ruth beside those basement boxes, Evan gave me back the symbol of the day he tried to take our home. But before he did, I had to decide whether a man could change without ever being rewarded with the fortune he once wanted. A year passed. Lily's first birthday filled the backyard with yellow balloons, folding chairs, and the kind of noise our house had been missing long before the betrayal. Evan grilled hamburgers, carried plates, and let Lily smear frosting across his cheek. He did not take out his phone to preserve the moment for strangers. He simply lived inside it. By then, Ridgway had sent him through an appliance repair certification course. He paid part of the tuition from savings and earned the rest by replacing our shed roof, staining the back fence, and rebuilding the basement window trim. The store promoted him to service coordinator and assigned him a used white van with Ridgway Appliance Repair printed across the side. The first morning he parked it beside my old Ford. He stood looking at the 2 vehicles. "When I was 13, I hated your service van," he said. "I remember. I thought everyone who saw it knew we were poor. What do you think now?" He opened the rear doors. Tools, hoses, valves, belts, and spare parts were arranged neatly inside. "I think it means somebody knows how to do something useful. That is usually what a work van means." He laughed. His debt was still enormous. Some months he paid $100. Some months overtime allowed $600. He wrote the full remaining balance on every payment so it could never become a vague problem again. The numbers moved slowly. His habits changed faster. He stopped explaining every mistake. He stopped announcing every good deed. When an urge to gamble returned, he told his counselor, his recovery group, and us before the urge became a secret. Sloane sent one short letter asking Ruth to know that she regretted touching her clothes and changing the lock. She asked for no money and no return. Ruth read it once. "Will you answer?" I asked. "Number." That was not cruelty. Forgiveness did not require renewed access. We placed the letter in the folder beside Evan's public correction and the signed family care plan. Then we returned to the birthday party where Lily was trying to eat the corner of a paper hat. The past remained recorded. It no longer controlled every room. On our 45th wedding anniversary, Ruth and I opened the bottle of bourbon Grant had taken from the cabinet. He had consumed only one glass before the family meeting interrupted his victory. The bottle had remained untouched for a year. Ruth poured 2 small servings and carried them to the porch. The repaired blue bowl sat on the windowsill behind us, filled with white daisies. "Do you regret not telling Evan about the money?" she asked. "Yes." She looked surprised by the speed of my answer. "I regret the secrecy," I said. "I do not regret living simply. I do not regret making him work. I regret believing silence could teach values. Would knowing have changed him? Maybe. Maybe it would have made him worse sooner. Maybe it would have prevented the shame that fed his lies. We cannot repair a past by inventing certainty." She rested her head against my shoulder. "Do you regret cutting him out?" I watched Evan through the side yard. He was teaching Lily how to put wooden blocks into a wagon. She handed him each block, then immediately demanded it back. "No," I said. The inheritance had become poison before he ever touched it. If I restore it, every good choice he makes will become a performance for money. I want him to know that the life he builds now belongs to him." Ruth nodded. "And Natalie, she understands the burden." Natalie and Marcus had asked us to place part of their future inheritance directly into the senior home repair fund rather than increasing what they would receive personally. They wanted enough for security, not enough to erase purpose. That request confirmed our decision more than any birthday card could have. Ruth raised her glass. "To the family we planned," she asked. I looked at her. "Number." "To the family we chose." "Closer." She thought for a moment. "To the family willing to do the work." We touched glasses. That became our definition. Family was not the person who shared your name while measuring your bedroom. Family was the person who protected your dignity when you had nothing to offer. Legacy was not a balance on a screen. Legacy was what your work taught the people who watched you. Wealth was not the ability to replace every old object. Wealth was knowing which things deserved repair. And respect was not something children owed automatically, while parents tolerated anything. Respect traveled both directions. It needed boundaries. It needed honesty. Sometimes it needed distance. Sometimes it required allowing someone you loved to experience the full weight of his choices. That night after Ruth went inside, Evan joined me on the porch. He carried a small wooden box he had made from leftover cedar. "What is that?" I asked. "For you." I thought we discussed gifts. "It cost nothing except sandpaper." He placed it in my hands. Inside lay the old useless key from the day the locks were changed. It had been cleaned and mounted on a small brass plate. Below it, Evan had engraved a sentence. "A house is not yours because you expect it. It is yours when you help keep it safe." I read the words twice. "Where did you learn that?" "You." I never said it. "You made me live it." He sat in the other rocking chair. "I don't expect you to trust me completely," he said. "I don't expect the will to change. I don't expect the basement arrangement to end because I have been good for a year. That is wise. But I need you to know something. I waited. If you and Mom lost every dollar tomorrow, I would still be here." A year earlier, that sentence would have sounded like another performance. Now he was wearing a Ridgeway work shirt. A small cut crossed one knuckle. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he ignored it. Through the screen door, Lily laughed as Ruth made animal noises in the kitchen. I believed he wanted the sentence to be true. That was not the same as knowing it would always be true. Trust could begin with a window raised 1 inch. I hope so, I replied. He accepted that answer. We sat together as the sky darkened over Maple Ridge Road. The house behind us was not silent anymore. It held a baby's laughter, Ruth's music, Natalie's tired footsteps, Marcus's lesson plans, and the ordinary sounds of people sharing space without trying to own one another. The basement light glowed through its narrow window. For months, I had viewed that room as Evan's punishment. Now I understood it differently. It was where the false version of my son had gone to die. It was also where a real man had begun slowly and painfully to build himself. I had not won because I had more money than they knew. Nothing about Ruth crying felt like victory. Neither did Sloane leaving Bellwether collapsing, or Evan losing an inheritance he had once mistaken for his identity. What mattered came later: a repaired faucet, a returned key, a debt payment too small to impress anyone, a work van parked proudly in the driveway, a grown man telling the truth even when the truth made him look ordinary. On the kitchen windowsill, Ruth's cracked blue bowl held fresh daisies. The fracture was still visible. We had never tried to hide it. That was our family, not restored to what it had been, not pretending the damage had vanished, still capable of holding something beautiful. So tell me honestly, would you have allowed Evan to live in the basement and earn his way back, or would changing the locks on his own parents have ended the relationship forever? For me, dignity had to come first, then boundaries, then consequences. Mercy received only the smallest opening, and Evan had to widen it through work. Money exposed his character, but money could not repair it. A family legacy is not something you collect after a funeral. It is something you prove worthy of while the people who loved you